Ooh, that looks tasty.
Hungry Gamer is back with another game review. Today we're talking about Astra from Mind Clash Games, designed by Patrick Porcolab and Frias Schoberl, with Esther Christina Sass. And I am so sorry that I have completely butchered those names. And thank you to Mind Clash Games for sending me this copy to review. Now, before I get started, please make sure you turn your Klingon subtitles, because if I make any mistakes in the rules overview, that's where you will find the corrections. Now, what this game is this is what I'm calling a Euro and Write game, in that you are spending your resources to take actions out on the board, and occasionally you will do a rest action where you recover everything, a la worker placement. And what you are doing is you are discovering these various constellations. Now, if you are not interested in how this game is played and just want to jump into my final thoughts, then you would go to the timestamp on the screen right now. For those of us still here, let's talk about how this game is played. So what's going to happen is, on your turn, you are going to do one of two things. You are either going to do an observe action, meaning you will look at the constellations, or a rest action, which means you will recover all of your stardust and move this little sphere around the board. And the game is going to end when eventually in this deck there's a card will come out that will say game over. Now, let's go through how the game is going to work. The first thing that's going to happen is on your turn you can use any cards in your tableau. And these are the cards in the tableau. To start the game you have none, but they'll do things like this one here. If I had this, I could use that and instantly gain a telescope. I could use this one here, which would instantly gain me 4 Stardust and lets me break a rule, and so on and so on. Though, and I will point out that some of the cards, especially the cards from the promo pack, have you doing crazy, weird, silly things, like this one right here, where you instantly act out a sci-fi movie, and if someone can figure out what it is, then you wind up getting points. Now, what you're going to do is, on your turn, if you are doing an observe action, you will spend however much Stardust that you would like, and you're spending the Stardust on the stars in the constellation. You always have to start at the big double circle. So let's just say that I choose to spend 4 Stardust, like so, and then I can fill in stars that are adjacent to each other. And I can only go one direction. So that matters for ones like this here, so I could not go 1, 2, 3, 4, then 5, 6. You have to go in one direction. So I did those 4, and you'll notice that I filled in a big shiny star, also known as a grand star. Every time you do that, you'll come down here to your wisdom track, and you will mark one of those in. The reason that this matters is that as you're playing through, you will be collecting those constellation cards, and I'll tell you how to do that in just a minute. And you can only have as many as you have filled in here. So to start the game, you can only have 2. But now I can have 3, now I could have 4, and so on up to a total of 8. And the same thing with your Stardust here. You start being able to, every time you rest, you get 5 back, but if you are able to unlock these, you get more and more back every time that you rest. Now let's talk about how this is going to work. So I've gone ahead here and I've filled in 4. Then let's say on another player's turn, they spend 2 Stardust, and they go 1 and 2, and then on the next player's turn, they go ahead and just spend 1 Stardust, and they complete this constellation here. Now, here's the interesting thing. The player that filled in the last star, they will take this card. And this card will be worth 1 point at the end of the game, assuming it has been refreshed, as in it has not been used. And they will then have access to this power down here. The other thing that they will do is at the beginning of the game, every player gets one of these, which is a way to score more and more points. And because this is a fire symbol, they would cross off the fire symbol there. And you will get increasing amounts of points for filling in each column. So this column, let's just say I finished the game like this. I would get 6 points for this complete column. I would get 3 points for that column, nothing for that, and then I would look going across. And the further across you get, the more points you get. So in this case, I would get nothing for that one. I would get 6 points for that one. I would get 2 points for this one and 2 points for the last one. So my card would give me 9, 15, 17, 19 total points. Now, back to this here. So the last player, in this case the black player, would get to take the card itself. Then, whatever player filled in the most stars, in this case orange, would get first choice of these rewards down here. So we'll just say that they are going to take 1 telescope. So they would take that, while the pink player would then get to choose what they want, and we'll just say that they're going to take 3 points, like so. And there is a variety of different things that you can get on the cards, but that is roughly how that works. Then they'll take the card, and we'll flip out a new one. And as you can see, the game end card came up, and that means everyone will get equal turns, in other words, until you get back to the first player, and then the game will end. Now, I've mentioned these telescopes before, and the way those work is, let's just say on my turn, I have those there, and I really want this crab. So I could start my turn and go 1, 2, 3, 4, and spend my 4 Stardust for that. But then I could spend a telescope and take another action where I can only spend Stardust, so I'll spend 1 more, like so, and now I have completed the entire card myself. The other thing that you can do is you can do a rest action. And the way the rest action works is like this. First off, let's just say that I had this card and I had used it at one point to get that telescope that I just used. Then, when it's my turn to rest, I will get to recover all the way up to my highest level here, my Stardust bag, which is 8. So I would get 8 Stardust. And then any of my cards that have the same symbol as where the sphere is right here, in this case fire, would refresh. And then I would move it on. And anytime it gets back to the fire, we would discard the top card of the deck, thus getting us closer to this game end card right there. And you're going to go around and around to the game ends. You'll do your in-game scoring, which involves what your leftover resources, how far you've gotten on these tracks, and of course, this right here. But that's pretty much how this game works. So, what do I like about this game? The first thing that I like is I like that this is another game that falls into that category of heavy blank and right. And there's just not a lot of those games out there, and there's definitely not a lot of them that I think do it particularly well and keep me engaged enough that I actually want to play a blank and right game that's going to take 40 plus minutes. I'll do it with Hadrian's Wall, though Hadrian's Wall is much shorter if you're playing solo, but I'll do it with Hadrian's Wall. I'll do it with Twilight Inscription. I'll do it with Guild of Merchant Explorers, even though you're not actually writing anything. It's basically a whatever. It's basically a flip and write game. And I'll do it with Astra. And to me, Astra is, I'm going to call it a Euro and right. It's not really, but it's the nearest thing I can call it with, because you're doing that managing of resources. And even though there's only really one resource you're managing, you're not rolling anything, you're not flipping anything, you're just using your Stardust, you're choosing when to rest, you're going to pull all your stuff back and send the sphere around the wheel there to kind of push the end of the game. And so it has a little bit of kind of a worker placement vibe to it. So I'm going to call it a Euro, right? And I do like that. I also, well, I like the cards. It's fun writing on the cards. I got to admit, it looks nice. It's a pleasant looking game. It's not a stunningly beautiful game because it's just all stars and stuff, but it is a pleasant game to look at. The components are nice. The box is not that big, and all of that I like. I like that the game is really easy to get into. But the simplicity of learning the game is belied by the fact that there are a lot of very hard choices that you have to make. The choices of how many stars you're going to fill in on any given turn and which constellation you're going to work on is very, very challenging, because you're constantly balancing that I don't want to actually win this constellation, I just want a bonus on the bottom, with it's time to win a constellation so I can start getting those big in-game points. Because the constellations themselves aren't going to get you a lot of points, but those in-game points, by getting the constellations, can get you a ton of points. And so that's a wonderful, wonderful balance that you're trying to figure out, that you're trying to play with. I also like the tableau building of it as you're trying to figure out which of the constellations you actually really want, because you want to use that power, and then when to use that power, because it's really not easy to reset those cards, especially if you're playing in a larger player count game, as you're kind of waiting for it to get back to your turn, so maybe you'll be able to rest and recharge those different constellations. I think all of that is very, very clever. And I will also do a quick call out here to the promo pack. The promo pack is fantastic. The weird, silly things that they have you do on the promo cards are just a blast. I love them. That is how you do promo cards. So if you get this game, you have to get the promo deck. And I also like that without doing an aggressive player interaction, you do have real player interaction as you're playing through and trying to figure out what the other players are going to do and getting maybe just 1 star on a card just so you can get something. I think that really works well because in general, blank and rights are not very interactive. And I think this one does a pretty good job of giving it some interaction in a way that feels somewhat novel and interesting to me. So what are my quibbles with the game? First one is, I don't think it works particularly well at 2. I've played it at 2 and we had a good time and it was interesting, but it's just not as interesting as you want it to be because you're dealing with this kind of AI bot that fills things here and there, and you don't get the really fun time of trying to figure out, okay, I want to make sure that I get a couple more stars on here because I know I'm not going to win this constellation, but I want to have first choice. You don't get that because either you win the constellation or you get the first choice of whatever's left over. And it's just not really made for the 2-player experience, in my opinion. In the same note, I don't know that I want to play this game at 5. I've played it at 2, 3, and 4. And I don't know that at 5 it's as interesting either because you're waiting a long time for it to come back around to your turn. This game can be prone to moments of analysis paralysis, especially as you're kind of getting towards the end of the game. You know it's coming, you're trying to figure, okay, I have a telescope here, and I have these cards, so I could use this, and that would get me this much stardust, and I could use that here and use that here, or I could come over. And so towards the end of the game, sometimes it really does slow down a little bit, and you really have some analysis paralysis. And in a 5-player game, I don't know that that's an experience that I want to have. I do think the game really shines at 3 players and 4 players as well. And then the next thing I'll say is there is a bit of the challenge, as I mentioned earlier, in your tableau, being able to reset things, refresh your cards. And as I said, in the larger player count games, sometimes it can feel really hard to reset those because you can only do it if the sphere is in the exact right spot and it moves every time someone rests. So you can kind of find yourself having to take a suboptimal rest to recharge these things, and that can feel frustrating for some players. Or it might feel like it's the core puzzle of the game, but one or the other, it might feel frustrating. And the same thing with the way that sometimes you're going to find yourself just putting 1 star out somewhere because you want to be able to finish something and the other player wants to be able to finish something, and then you're both this kind of at a stalemate doing 1 star here, 1 star there. And that's a little bit of a player type, a personality type, but just something to keep in mind. And the last thing I'll say is the game is longer than you think it's going to be. It's just a longer blank and right game. It just is. And when you're playing at 4 players, now this is with teaching. The last time I played, it was 4 players with teaching, and it took an hour and a half. And that might be longer than you want to play. So there you have it, folks. That is Astra. This is a game that I was very pleasantly surprised by, and I'm glad that Mind Clash gave me a copy at Gen Con, because it wasn't one I was interested in at all. But they talked about it and said, hey, are you interested in covering this? I was like, I don't know. Stars, I don't care. But I walked over and I watched some gameplay and I was like, you know what, that is kind of interesting. That is kind of cool. And so I brought it home and I have definitely enjoyed it. I took it with me to RageCon. People had a good time with it there. And most of the people I've played with have enjoyed it. And I think this is one that kind of flew a little bit under the radar. And I think it's probably because it's just a longer and heavier blank and right game, which makes it kind of a bit of a smaller market. But there you have it, folks. That is Astra. As always, if I've made any mistakes in the rules overview, please let me know in the comments with the timestamp so I can get that in the Klingon subtitles. If you found this video useful, please like, subscribe, share, maybe become a channel member. As always, thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.